Hi everyone and welcome back to Chess for Charity. In this video, we have a very simple puzzle. 4 pieces on the board, 2 pawns and 2 kings. Your job is to figure out what is the one winning move for white in this position. So I wanted to show this puzzle because it's just amazing the simplicity of it. There's only 2 pawns. There's 1 pawn for white, 1 pawn for black. And of course, I should say the pawns are going up the board there, down the board there, and the goal is to see what wins. So take a moment, see if you can figure it out. It's really instructive, and I hope you can learn something from this puzzle. And before I show the solution, I would just quickly encourage you to subscribe. Remember that half of my income that I earn on this channel goes directly to charity, so liking, subscribing, all that stuff helps me out so much. Okay, let's get started here. So maybe the first thing you think is, hey, I have this pawn here, and this pawn needs to just bolt. It needs to get to f8, be a queen, and see what happens. If that's what you thought, I think you should learn something about what's called the square. You probably already know it by the name. But if I play f4, you have to ask yourself, can black, the black king, get within white's square? What is the square? Well, if you don't know it, I'll give a really quick demonstration. It's the diagonal line, and you make a square out of it like this. If black can enter that square on their move, you will not be able to promote without being caught. So just to see that in action, so I'll play, instead of king b4, I'll play king b5 actually. King b5, you push, I move the king closer, you push, I move the king closer, you push, I move the king closer, and I'm catching you, right? That's the idea. That's the idea of the box, of the square. You probably should know that already if you're a somewhat serious chess player, but it's always good to double check and make sure that your intuition is lining up with the actual square on the board. Okay, so f4 does not work immediately. Okay, what else do we have? Well, I have a few king moves. I have king c3, king d3, or sorry, king c3, king c4, king d4, king e4, king e3, and of course I have some of these other ones which I think are just kind of obviously wrong because it will lead the king in the position. So which of these is correct? This is kind of the beauty of the puzzle. We have to figure out which of these moves is correct. Well, I just showed that the king is going to b5, c6, d7, and it's going to catch you on f8, so probably it goes to e8 and then catches you. So maybe you think, I need to stop this king from getting to b5. So I play king c4. The idea is to stop. I'm making this little wall here. Yeah, that sounds good, but what does that allow? Honestly, what does it invite? It invites this check, and you can't go too far. Right? If you want to start running this way, thinking you're going to escort this pawn off the board, be careful here, because this pawn is quite fast. There's only 4 squares away. This position actually is a win for black. So don't do that. Maybe you play king c3 because you want to stay connected to this square, but you also have hopes of launching this pawn down the board. Yeah, that doesn't work because black just checks you, and even if you go here, black is trying to draw this game. They're not trying to win. Their king is far away from your pawn, so they're just trying to see if they can track this guy down and hopefully meet on f8. And in this position, you're well within the box, right? Like this, right? You're within this. You play king b5. I'd probably play king b4 just to keep this pawn held. I'm in the box. You go here. Hey, look. I'm in the smaller version of the box, right? And it just goes like this until that box eventually is, that one square. It's a singular box, and it doesn't matter. This is a draw, right? Okay, so the point being, king c4 does not work because it allows this check. So maybe you think to yourself, okay, great, I don't want to get checked, so I'll go king c3. That way you can't just escort your pawn up the board without resistance. I like the way you're thinking about it, but remember, the objective was to stop king b5 because king b5 is now totally on the cards. I play king c3. they're pushing their pawn up the board here, and they're going to have access to the square because now they're in time. What do I mean by that? Well, there are a couple ways to draw it if you're black. I think the simplest is king b5, but let's just play b5. Now, if you run with the pawn, this is check, and now I have access to this square, just like I had access to it a moment ago. You're going to have to move, and I can just start bolting to f8, and this is going to be fine. This is a draw. Nothing to be worried about here. You run up the board, guess what? I am in the square. If you didn't know about the square, you're going to know now. I am in the square. Okay, so let's look at our options now. We've looked at two. We've looked at king c4, king c3, and f4. Those are all failing. Okay, there's one move that we haven't looked at yet that's sensible, and that is king to d4. This is the correct first move. And just in case that's not clear, I should quickly say e4 and e3 just don't make any sense, because really that's taking you away from this pawn, and you want to shepherd your pawn off the board, but you can't get too far from their pawn, because then their pawn has running shoes on too. Okay, so king d4. What's the big deal here? Well, now if they go to play king b5, or if they play b5, either way, it's going to lead to the same result, which will be a win for white. It's going to be in two slightly different ways. So let's just say they start running. They play b5. Their goal is to just run you down the board. What do? Like this. Well, you just made this move to block the king's entrance, which means you better start running with this pawn. f4. I'm going to run this pawn home. But, and this is a really important note, don't just push this pawn forever. Don't just push, because there's actually some care involved. After f5, they play b3, and if you just quickly do the count, you're going to lose this race. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And that's not going to be very nice. That's going to be a draw. It's not going to be a win. So how do you hold on to this? This very important move, king c3, saying, I need you to spend one more move before you push this pawn up the board. And that one move, that one tempo is all white needs. Why? After king a3, look what square that's on. Look at the diagonal. Anything come to mind? I play f6, you play b2, I play f7, you promote to a queen. If you want to promote to a knight, it's not going to be a problem. It just won't be mate. It'll just be a longer thing. I play queen check. f8 equals queen check. Now the question to ask yourself, where do I go? Well, does it matter? If I go there, that hurts. That's mate. You just blocked your only out square. And if you go there, you won't lose the game in one move, but you'll lose the game in a few. Here, no stalemates. I'm taking that. That's what they call a skewer, because the more important piece is in the front. Okay, as opposed to pins. So the idea here is if they start running with the pawn, you start running with your pawn, but you have this very nice, after this move, this very nice king move. So what do you do here? After king d4, you can't just bolt with the pawn because that will lead in a loss. So maybe you think, I got to catch their pawn. So you play king b5. Well, here's the beauty of it. White puts on their shoulder pads and plays king d5, and I am now holding the line here on the c file. You can't come in, and not only that, you just blocked your own square. You can't move your b pawn anymore. So now you have to get out of the way, either king a4, king a5, king a6, and now it's going to lead to just another wasted move, and I can run this up the board. So let's say you play king a4, I play f4. Now again, am I going to run this up the board without caring? Not necessarily. b5. Now, do I keep going? Yeah, I have some time. I'm not worried yet. When this gets closer to down here, I'll be worried. Here, push. Now, again, you have to ask yourself at every single move, do I play this move or do I have to return the king? Well, let's just imagine for a second, if I push this pawn will become out of reach for me. So I have to quickly retreat just to make sure I'm guarding some of these squares. If they push the pawn again, I can accompany the pawn, and that will help me out a lot because that will lead to the king being on this diagonal after they move forward. So just like I was just saying, that's what's going to happen. B3, you don't push the pawn. You might think you push the pawn because it looks good. But look, push the pawn, B2, push the pawn. You might think, oh, I'll just checkmate them, right? No, because you're not queening first, they're queening first. If only you had this move, but you don't have that move. This is going to be a draw. There are plenty of ways to draw it. Just start checking the king and just check, 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 check. Not going to be a win. So you don't push the pawn. Instead, after B3, you play this again. Very critical move. King C3. The whole point, the whole beauty of this is that after King A3, you can push this pawn up the board and you're giving check to the king on A3. So bang, and then push. And then if they try to push, you just allow it. Say, go ahead. And if you want to promote to a knight, it's not going to do anything. I just run away. Right here. You can't check me again. I'm promoting to a queen, and the super knight cannot exist. Go from here to here and take that. So this is going to be a loss. So pretty much the idea is, even after you promote to the queen, it's with check. The most important check in this game, probably. King A4, and this will lead to a nice win. So yeah, that is it. It's one move from the very beginning. This position, one move wins. The only move is King D4. All the other moves, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 moves, lose. Well, I shouldn't say lose, they draw. 9 moves, draw, and I'm sure you can make it worse if you wanted to lose this game intentionally. But in this initial position, with best play, 1 move wins, 9 move draws. 9 moves draw. Amazing. Okay, that's it. Hopefully you get the point. That's a lot of fun. If you enjoyed the puzzle, please be sure to like and subscribe. A lot of work goes into these, and I really hope you're enjoying them. All feedback is welcome as well, because I just want to improve these videos and help charity. But yeah, that's it for now. Thank you so much. Bye.